Welsh lamb and mint pie, the ingredients you will need is some diced Welsh lamb, some onions and carrots, some lamb stock, local ale, and some fresh or dried mint. Then for the pastry, some plain flour, butter, water to bind, and an egg to glaze. Start with your meat. We've got some diced Welsh lamb here, and for 4 portions you'll need roughly 600 grams. So this has been diced ready. Then we're going to add some plain flour. This just is to coat really. So add a little bit at a time, a couple of tablespoons, and toss it in the flour to make sure all the pieces of meat are well coated with the flour. Add a little bit more if you need some. Alternatively, you can do this in a plastic bag and just give it a good shake. Then season it with plenty of salt and some black pepper. Yeah. Give it another stir. And this is now ready to go into either a casserole dish or a pan such as this that has a tight fitting lid. So in goes the meat. Don't worry if there's some surplus flour because that will help to thicken the sauce. Then add some diced carrots, probably 3 or 4 medium-sized diced carrots, and 2 sliced onions. Give it a good mix. Now normally when you make a pie, some recipes say to seal the meat before you cook it, but this works just as well because you're going to cook it for a couple of hours, and in that time the meat will be sealed and nicely succulent. So make sure it's all mixed in well. Then the final ingredients. We've got some dried mint here, about a tablespoon of dried mint, but you can also use fresh mint or a bay leaf or any other mixed herbs or thyme, and you can ring the changes really with any mixture of herbs. And then we're going to add some lamb stock, about 200 millilitres of lamb stock. And then you have a choice. You can either use some local ale, the same quantity of local ale, just over all the meat, or you could use some red wine, the same quantity of red wine as well. Now put a lid on it and put it in an oven for 2 hours at 150 degrees centigrade. Make sure crisp pastry to go on your lamb pie. We've got some plain flour here, about 300 grams will cover the pie for 4 portions. So that's plain flour, and about half a teaspoon of salt, and then half the same quantity of butter, or you can use hard margarine or a mixture of lard and butter. So this is 150 grams of butter. Then we're just going to rub the flour and butter together through your fingertips so that the mixture resembles breadcrumbs. Now alternatively, you can do this in a food processor. You can put the flour and butter or fat in a food processor and process it for less than a minute till you reach the breadcrumb stage. And then add your liquid water and then pulse for a few seconds until the dough comes together. You can also use ready prepared pastry, or you can use puff pastry as well as an alternative crust. So we've now reached the breadcrumb stage and we're ready to add our liquid. So we make a little hole in the centre and then add some chilled water, roughly about 70 millilitres. Then mix it well, either with a spoon or a fork, until it starts binding together. And then you can add your... It's easier then to do it with your hands. And then just mix it until all the mixture binds together to form a ball. Here we are. So we've left the pastry to relax and chill for about half an hour or so. And now we're ready to roll it out to go on the pie. So I've got a floured surface here. And then you just roll it to the shape of your pie dish. That's it. Make sure it's evenly rolled. Right, now we're ready to put it on top of the pie. So the lamb has been cooking for about 2 hours, and as you can see, it's absorbed a lot of the liquid. The liquid's been reduced and it's lovely and tender. It's a cheap cut of meat, so it needs long, slow cooking. And the meat can come from anywhere from rural Bridgend, from C&G and Morgan's and Son, to Maddock Cembry, or to Talgarth Organics. There's lots of local suppliers of good Welsh lamb. You can also use other seasonal vegetables other than carrots. You could put mushrooms in it, and you could alternate the lamb to be a beef dish, a beef and ale, for example. It's the same principle, whatever meat or vegetables you use. So we've left it to cool for a little bit, and we're ready now to pop the pastry on top. So pastry's rolled out. You just cover the pie dish with the pastry and just press it in so it fits. If you need to trim the edges, you can do that. And of course you can make individual dishes. And you can also use puff pastry rather than short crust pastry, as we've done here. You can either fork the edges, like I'm doing here, or you can just use finger and thumb to make a little edge. These pies can also be frozen, which is good. If you've got some spare time, you can make lots of pies ahead of time and freeze them, as I said, using different meats such as lamb, beef, pork, chicken, etc. Now I'm going to make a few slashes in the middle of the pastry. That's going to allow the steam to escape so that the pastry doesn't go soggy. And then finally brush the pastry with some beaten egg so that we have a lovely golden finish. Now that goes into the oven for about 30 minutes until the pastry is nice and golden. It needs to go into a fairly hot oven, about 200 degrees, so that the pastry gets nice and crisp and cooked through. There's an individual portion I've done using ready-made bought puff pastry. So same principle, cover the pie dish with the pastry and then brush with the egg glaze. And this is ready to go into the oven now. So the Welsh lamb and mint pie is now out of the oven. The pastry's nice and golden.